Good Monday morning, everyone. Hope you had a great weekend and your week's getting off to a good start today. And let's help start that weekend that week by going back and taking a minute to look at the Psalms. Psalm 119 again. We'll be looking, starting at the 60th verse today. And again, the psalmist the whole psalm is about his love for the Word of God and how the Word of God has affected him. And in this section that we're looking at, we see a man who has realized, come to the understanding and the recognition that the only thing he needs, the only thing he has that he can really depend on is the Word of God. And I think all of our lives we would find to be a much better be in a much better place if we would come to that realization as well. That when it comes right down to it, the only thing we really have, the only thing we can really depend on is the Word of God, and that's all we really need. That everything else comes out of that understanding. And so as we pick up in verse 60, back up and let's look at verse 59 again. He says, I thought on my ways and turned my feet unto my testimonies. We talked about that verse Saturday. And now in verse 60, kind of coming out of that thinking on his ways, considering his situation, considering all those things. He says, when I did that, verse 60, I made haste and delayed not to keep thy commandments. When we concentrate and meditate, think on our ways, and turn and focus ourselves on the Word of God, the proper response to that then is to make haste, to not delay in keeping His commandments. Unfortunately, I think as we look at that psalm, we probably all can identify to some extent with this thought. He says, I delayed not. It seems to be for most people that delaying or procrastination is the kind of the default position that we tend to wait. And I think sometimes, especially when it comes to, unfortunately, to being obedient to the Word of God. We try to do things. We're faced with a situation. We're faced with an issue in our life, and we have a series of options or decisions, choices that we could make. And for whatever reason, it seems that we try everything else first besides doing things in the way and the manner in which the Word of God directs us. I still remember going all the way back to the fourth grade, which has been a long, long time ago. My teacher in the fourth grade talking about the statement, when all else fails, follow directions. And I remember her talking about that and saying, why wait till everything else fails to follow directions? Why not follow the directions to start with? And I think about that, and often and usually it's times in my life when I didn't follow the directions, and now I'm going back and trying to follow the directions and clean up a mess that I think, man, if I'd have just listened to those directions that I got, some 40 years ago now, how much more than that, really, how much better, I guess almost 50 years ago, how much better my situation would be. And I think most of us probably can identify with that thought when it comes to the Word of God. If we're honest anyway, that we try to do it our way. We try to take advice from the world, what's popular. We listen to Dr. Phil and Oprah and, some of these other, talk show gurus. And, we try everything else and nothing else works. Then we seem to say, then we'll come and say, okay, well, what does God say? And the psalmist here, he says, when I think on my ways, when I thought about, where I was, how I got here, where I'm going, I hurried. I didn't waste any time to keep the commandments of God. And, I think again, our life would be totally I think it would be such a radical transformation in most people's lives if we would adopt the attitude of the psalmist that today I'm going to live according to the Word of God. I'm not going to wait till I've made a mess. I'm not going to wait till I've tore everything up and then try to go back and say, God, fix it. Many of you have probably heard me tell this story. I repeat it because it sticks in my mind. Years ago, many years ago, I worked in a jewelry store, and I did all the repair, the jewelry repair. I did all that kind of work. There was another jewelry store in the same mall, and I never will forget that night. I was there, and a lady come walking in the store with her hands, let me back up here, walking, like this, coming in the door of the store. And she walked up to the counter and dumped the contents of her hands on the counter. And again, I quickly realized, because they're very distinctive looking, that what she had were the parts and pieces of a Rolex watch. Now, I don't know what you know about Rolex watches, but most of them are extremely expensive, in the thousands of dollars. And she dumped the pieces there and said, "Can you put this back together?" And I just looked at it like, no, yeah, I'm not touching it. What happened to it? And she proceeded to tell me that she'd taken it to one of the other jewelry stores in the mall, trying to get the band adjusted, and that was what she was left with, was a Rolex in numerous pieces. And I said, "No, ma'am." I said, "If you would have brought it to me to begin with, I could have." I could have fixed your band for you, but at this point, after someone else has already um, made such a disaster out of it, I'm not going to touch it. And I've joked about it over the years. I said, anytime you're carrying your multiple $1,000 Rolex watch like this, you've got a problem. But the lesson there is how many times we come to God with our life in pieces in the palm of our hand, saying, "God, fix it. God, put this back together for me." If we would have just followed the advice and the direction of the psalmist and made haste to follow the commandments, the Word of God, in the first place. I hope you'll think about that today as you go through your life, as you go through the day, and you make decisions. What does the Word of God say? How is God leading you? How is He directing you in that decision? Make haste to go there first. Have a great day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow morning.